Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Festival of Media's Festival Fridays, our new initiative where we're doing virtual masterclasses. As you all know, with our conferences, we normally go to global brands around the world, which is like many of you in the audience today, and we ask you the key subjects that you need help or media knowledge on. We go out, curate an agenda, and normally bring it to you in a live space. So we've decided to make it virtual for obvious reasons this year. I must confess that not being able to run up and down a catwalk and wear my pink salmon chinos is very disheartening. I do have a new shirt for you all today, so hopefully you can see that. Nothing on underneath, only joking. I do have trousers on, but you will only see my shirt, thank goodness for you guys. But it's great to see you all. I think the wonderful thing about these masterclasses is that they are literally 40 to 45 minutes masterclass with an expert on the field that you need knowledge on. You don't have to sit at your computer all day. They're also on a Friday. We've got a fantastic agenda lined up. And to open with us, we've teamed up with our friends over at Spotify, who have been our wonderful inaugural partners for Festival Friday. And one of the key products and one of the key ideas that you were asking was about audio and how do you use audio in your campaigns? How do you interact with people in what is a very personal space? Well, don't you worry, we have a brilliant expert who's going to take you through all that and is going to enlighten you and educate you for the next 40 minutes. The beautiful thing is as well, you also have the opportunity to ask Q&A as well. So there is a Q&A button at the top of your screen. So if you have any questions, make sure they're not too rude and not too insensitive. But if they're good, you will be very lucky and they will be read out at the end. And hopefully Rob will have the answers. But without further ado, let's bring to the stage our speaker for today. It is none other than Rob Walker, Global Director for Creative Solutions at Spotify.
Thank you for having me, Jeremy.
No problem.
And I'm excited to be here and representing Spotify today. It's an absolute pleasure to be joining the Festival Media Gang and to be presenting to everybody in Europe. So good afternoon to everybody, and I appreciate you making the time on a Friday afternoon. I'm here today, as Jeremy said, to talk to you about audio and the creative options around audio and hopefully inspire you to understand the way that we think about audio as an audio-first company. And today we think about audio as being absolutely everywhere. And as audio is everywhere, it's really a powerful medium for you to think about how you can talk to brands, talk to customers as a brand, and think about going into places where sometimes screens are just not available to contact a customer. Correct. When we talk about audio, we talk about how it's limitless and how it's growing as well. We recently published a number, our global user base has grown. We're at 268 million. I know the numbers are growing all of the time. And the reason that we see it as being so popular and limitless is really that those screenless moments that people are in today and how users are more in control than ever before because of the nature of a digital platform like Spotify. And what's most exciting, I think, in the audio space today is that many channels today have been disrupted by digital, which has allowed us to understand how users behave in different ways than traditional mediums have. But it's actually really exciting that we've given the power over to users, and they are, including yourselves, creating and curating the way that they listen. It's not a broadcast medium anymore, and audio is much more personal to the point where we understand the moments that a user is in, which is defined by themselves, the mood that they're in, and the mindset that they're in as well. And that's because every single playlist that is created acts as a keyword for us to understand what it is that's happening in that specific time. And it's also in many different devices today as well. So mobile is actively acting as a remote control. You can connect Spotify into over 2,000 different products, hardware products, and many different software products as well. So it's available anywhere you are at any moment that you need it to be. And that's especially true at home with quarantine recently and all of us being in lockdown. Those of you who are parents will appreciate this, that there was an increase in homeschooling themed playlists of around 1,000%. And we also saw some more bizarre and fun things like a mass increase of quarantine haircut created playlists as well. And so we've seen some really interesting behavior starting to happen in cultural moments like the one that we're witnessing today. So really we're at this point today where we're understanding audio in a very different way, where audio is anytime, it's everywhere, and it's in control of the users. And what that means is that it's just different to what we've traditionally thought about as audio in the past as radio. It's not radio anymore. Radio tends to be much more broadcast. It's a one-size-fits-all medium, whereas audio on Spotify as a streaming platform allows people to understand audio differently, use audio differently, and effectively it becomes an audio that listens. And the creative potential of that is enormous. Because when you think about streaming audio and how limitless it is in terms of those behaviors I just talked you through, it gives us an opportunity to understand a user differently and understand that if we listen to them, we can create audio advertising that our users actually want to hear. And last year, as we focused Spotify as an audio network, growing in our podcast space, Daniel Ek, our CEO and founder of the company, was talking about the video industry and how we as brands invest into video. And currently we're investing 10x what we do in audio as a marketplace, which is interesting from an investment perspective. From a creative perspective, I think it's very interesting as well, because I think we tend to say that actually the creativity of a brand is defined by its visual nature. But I think the things that you can do in audio with the theater of the mind, using people's imagination through triggers in audio, really do beg that question again, which is that are our eyes really worth 10 times our ears? And rather than me kind of explain that to you again, what I'm going to do is play you a fun clip.
Hello, this is an audio ad to demonstrate how an audio ad works. And I am the copywriter who wrote the script, reading you the script I wrote. Our script opens on a white, sandy beach in Thailand. But of course, I'm in a soundproof recording booth with absolutely zero natural sunlight. Introductions and context, like the last 20 seconds, make your brand intent clear early on. And Spotify Streaming Intelligence allows you to talk to listeners based on what they're listening to, or what they're doing. So to demonstrate, let's just pretend I'm on that white, sandy beach in Thailand. Audio ads are typically 15 or 30 seconds, and include multiple voices. I said,
and include multiple
voices.
You can also use recognizable voices tailored for your audience.
Do you literally just want me to say, hi, I'm a recognizable voice?
Perfect. That's Cole, and he does the Dissect podcast. Oh, and not to mention music and sound effects, of course. You can set the mood with music. No. Definitely not. Now that's more my kind of vibe. You can get up close and personal with binaural audio. That was weird. Never been through someone's ear before. Or take audio to a whole other level with, say, bacon-based meditation ads targeted to listeners of chill music. For more bacon-based meditation music from this totally made-up fast food brand, say, play now.
Now playing bacon-based meditation playlist on Spotify.
hopefully we can skip through and see another example in a moment. So as we think about the potential of audio and really the creative opportunity within audio, internally we think about these kind of three areas, which we call our code to creativity. And number one is around driving our direction through data, understanding the data that we sit on at Spotify and being able to utilize that. Understanding culture as well as a global platform that's using this data to understand our users and create for them. We also want to make sure that we are understanding the culture of our users and the places and spaces they're in. And then the third one is context is everything. To us, it's incredibly important to understand the context of what a user is doing and how they're listening to create fantastic advertising. So I'm going to take you through the first one, data drives direction. When I talk about data, we have an enormous amount of data. We have over 4,000 different microgenres of music coded into the platform. And we also understand every music genre at its most granular level. So we understand the happiness of a song, sadness of a song. We understand, is it upbeat or low beat? And we understand a lot about how users are using that music. But we also understand the distinctivity of specific places as well. So what this screenshot is showing you is from a publicly available website, which is called the Spotify map of music. And what you can see here is various different places across Europe that you can click on. If we click into Germany, for example, you can see the different distinctive genres and emerging genres that are happening in that market at that time. So here you can see on the right side, of course, we can understand what's most popular and most viral in that country, but we can also understand what is distinctive, and meaning what is actually happening in Germany from a music listening perspective that is not necessarily happening in other countries. And then what's emerging as well. And that's really interesting when you think about that as an advertiser. If you want to try and create new spaces for communicating with users, you can come into here and start to understand the culture of different places based on that. So you can do both your mass and then your emerging as well. And when we think about that, and we think about the level of data that we have and the level of understanding that we have, we really think about it as us being able to listen to our users and thinking about how we can be adaptable to our users based on that. So the clip I'm about to show you is an example of how we did that for a well-known global beer brand in different markets.
Something is missing. Ah, right. The right beats get you to the finish line faster, where post-run bliss awaits. That's why Spotify and Michelob Ultra teamed up to give runners an extra boost, from warm-up to cool-down. On Spotify, there are over 9,000 user-created running playlists. That's on top of the many Spotify-curated playlists. From tempo to genre to mood. Runners take their playlists seriously. So we invited active listeners to join the Michelob Marathon, getting personalized beats to fuel their next run. Each playlist was totally unique. Spotify used a combination of the top 10,000 running tracks in each market, along with real-time cues like recent listening history, the length and intensity of the run, and current weather conditions to generate each person's playlist. Spotify and Michelob also delivered 3,000 different audio ads, giving runners a personalized pep talk as they hit the pavement. This is what it's all about, knocking off the Ks. In addition to mid-run motivation, listeners got extra post-run shout-outs too. Good run today. You smashed it. The experience went beyond the finish line. After the run, listeners could upload their sweat session to win free beer, Michelob swag, and potential entry to the Oxford Half Marathon. In 82 days, we reached 71% of runners, With 9 million impressions delivered, 150,000 personalized playlists were generated, making the Michelob Marathon the most engaged brand experience with runners on Spotify. Active listeners across the UK and Mexico got moving with just the right tracks, along with free beer and other prizes when the hard work was over. Going the distance never sounded or tasted so good. So make sure you do it at your pace to your rhythm and dial up the motivation with the Michelob Marathon.
Great. So that example there shows you a little bit of how we use our unique data sets, our first-party data to understand users and understand places and spaces that they're in to create really unique experiences for them. The next part is understanding culture and really what culture means to our users as well. When we talk about culture, we intend to work with brands to say, not just that culture matters, but it shouldn't just be something that you badge either. So how can you actually tune into the culture of consumers, of users, and start to create something that's unique for your brand, but also cuts through the noise of all of those kind of badging sponsorships that you see out in the wild. When I talk about those unique opportunities, this was a really interesting one from a few years ago. And you may remember there was an eclipse in the US, and as that eclipse happened across the US, what you're seeing here in this graph is that as the moon crossed the sun and darkened the land, people streamed Total Eclipse of the Heart by Bonnie Tyler, probably the first and only time that Bonnie Tyler has been popular in the US in the last 20 years. And that might be a unique experience where an eclipse doesn't happen very often. But there are these repeatable moments that happen as well. For example, the World Cup. And during the last World Cup, every time that the French team won a game, the French users on Spotify streamed Gloria Gaynor's I Will Survive. And we saw huge spikes of that happening against every single game, and it became the anthem for the team as well. And of course, we see that in every sporting moment as well, which may seem unusual to some brands thinking that Spotify is a music platform or a podcast platform, but people really do soundtrack every single different moment, whether that's a big pop culture moment or if it's a weird moment like an eclipse that doesn't happen every so often. So by understanding those moments and understanding the behaviors around those moments, we can actually create things that are really exciting and interesting using audio. And if you're interested in understanding more of those moments on Spotify that are a bit more repeatable, then you can use this tool that we developed for brands. It's called the Culture Compass. And just by going into the Culture Compass, you'll be able to see various different markets around the world. You'll be able to understand different time periods, and then just the different moments that are spiking on our platform. And they could be anything from the Super Bowl in the US to Halloween in the US as well, or we could be doing Dry January in the UK. Which is a really interesting space. This just shows you an example of the type of data that we offer to our advertisers as well, which we can then use to tighten up our briefs as we think about what does audio look like. And what we've done is created a few different audio examples in there and allowed you the opportunity to soundtrack your experience when you're looking at this tool as well. If we go through to the next slide, what we really think about this is that when you understand culture and you understand users and you really listen to them, it becomes much more insightful. An example I'm about to play you is an example where a brand, top global brand, Smirnoff Vodka, came to us and wanted to own the moment of International Women's Day. But they wanted to do something different. They wanted to highlight the fact that there is gender disparity in the music industry and how they could get users to understand that in a unique way. So we took the opportunity to actually invite users into an experience where we analyzed their listening behavior and showed them the gender bias in their own listening. Here's a quick clip to explain it more.
We've partnered with Smirnoff to make music more equal between male and female artists. The experience we've built shows the user the ratio of men and women artists in their listening history. The user is then able to adjust the ratio of men and women and then dynamically generate a playlist that creates a more balanced listening experience.
I think what's most important about this is to have the visibility to allow people to feel that their gender won't restrict them from being an artist.
That was a great moment for us because it not just highlighted an important subject matter, but it actually brought users in and actually allowed them to have an insight into themselves, which is a really cool way of thinking about how you can utilize culture and how you can use audio to contact people to do that. The third one is context. As I mentioned, context is very important to us on Spotify. When we say that context is important, really we talk about context is everything for us. Because of the different ways that people listen on our platform, whether they're listening to playlists that they've created or our editorial team have created, we understand the moment of that. And it could be anything from spending time with your family or gaming. And by understanding all of those different contexts that are available, we can also think about how we create specific advertising that people want to hear in those moments that doesn't feel too disruptive. But the first rule really of anything that's context-based is making sure that it's user-first. So really consider when you're introducing your message, try not to interrupt the flow of their content. Consider visual off as well, and visual branding that may be in sync with the audio experience as well. And really tailor to the music and the podcast tastes. We can help you understand what that music they're listening to is, or that podcast that they're listening to. So you can create for that and ultimately don't kill their vibe that they're in. And it's not just because we think it's a great principle to create great audio for people in a different context, but we know that context works. Campaigns that have ran on Spotify and include our first and third party segments drive almost 3% higher awareness and 5% higher intent for brands as well. And really, when you think about context and you really listen to context, audio becomes additive to the experience versus disruptive. And that additive experience is something that we have been talking a lot to very visual brands about. And there potentially is probably no more visual brands than the next example that I'm going to show to you when we worked with a Hollywood icon to promote the new movie that was released.
What happens when one of Hollywood's most iconic writer-directors and a world-renowned streaming platform join forces to launch one of the most highly anticipated films of the year, entirely through audio?
Hello, everybody. It's Quentin Tarantino, and you've tuned in to my podcast on my soundtrack album, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, exclusively on Spotify.
Music plays a leading role in each of Tarantino's legendary films. His 2019 masterpiece, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, was no different. Every sound in the movie was designed to transport audiences to 1969's Los Angeles. So Spotify and Sony Pictures teamed up to tell the audio story behind Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. From a special guest curation of the film and TV's favorites playlist filled with songs from Tarantino's prolific film library, and an exclusive podcast led by Rolling Stone's David Wild, where the director gave a song-by-song breakdown of Hollywood's instantly classic soundtrack.
Paul Revere and the Raiders have never been as cool as they are going to be the weekend this movie comes out.
I wasn't that hip to this alliteration of Deep Purple.
Classic KHJ radio ads also brought the audio landscape of LA in the late 60s to life in the film soundtrack.
It's Tanya Tanning Butter. Tanya was a very important sponsor, apparently, to KHJ.
New Tanya Tanning Butter, the suntan product with no sunscreen added.
Through the conversation, fans got an intimate glimpse of Tarantino's creative process.
When we put it together, it was so bam, it was so right on, which is every time it was over, we wanted to watch it again.
And got to relive some of the most powerful music moments from his celebrated films.
Might be one of the most touching moments I've ever done in one of my movies, and I think that music just underscores it and tells you what you've been watching all along, if you didn't realize it.
The collaboration was a smashing success, winning rave reviews from the press. The fans dug it too. Audiences around the world streamed the songs, podcast episodes, and playlist by the millions. Diving headfirst into the audio world that complemented Tarantino's visual world.
Line.
Get ready to experience the genius musical mind of Quentin Tarantino.
I think of all my records, this would be the one, if I had got at 13 or 12 or 13, would be my favorites.
Now streaming only on Spotify.
That was a really fun one to work on, especially when you work with a very visual brand. It's very video focused, and think about how do you bring that to life simply through audio. And there's just a great number of ways that we can do that when we think about how data drives our direction, how it's culture really matters to those moments, and then also the context that's there as well. But all I'm saying, all of this, I think audio and digital audio, streaming audio is ripe for innovation. And I encourage you to kind of tear the raw book up that I just talked to you about and experiment and have fun. And I can't stress this enough, that audio is quick to develop. It's quick to get on platform. It's efficient from a cost perspective, and it can be a lot of fun as well. You can do a lot of creative work. And I want to play you something that was recorded in London, but actually may seem like it was recorded in a much more exotic place than that.
Asia. 7 Worlds, 1 Planet continues Sunday on BBC One and BBC iPlayer. Click now to experience more.
So that was a fun one we did with the BBC, which is incredible to do that work with them. If you're interested in understanding a little bit more about what you can do in the creative space for audio, go to Spotify, on your Spotify, type in Creativity You Can't See and listen to our audio guide for a bit more. But if you're excited enough to give this a go for yourself and your brands today or on Monday when you're back at work, then go to adstudio.com. It's our self-serve platform for advertisers available in most markets across Europe. And you can create an ad and play that within a day. We're there to help you with scripting, with actually producing the audio ad, and then getting it on platform so you can see the results in real time as well. It's a great place for you to test and iterate and play around for not a lot of money. So thank you very much for your time today. I really appreciate the opportunity to present to you all, and I'm excited to answer some questions.
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much. Rob, that was fantastic. If we had a live audience right now, there would be lots of cheers and lots of clapping. So I'll do it for you. Yeah, fantastic. It was really, really insightful. And the good news is we do have a question, which is quite exciting. So, Rob, I will ask you the question, and then you will come back into this platform. So the question is, they've kept it anonymous. They've said, traditionally, one could only reach my target audience on their commute in the morning and in the evening. How have listening habits changed this? Over to you, Rob.
I think it's oh, there we go. Yeah, I think it's changed massively. I think that you have to understand those 2,000 places that we are integrated today, and how that ubiquity has made it possible for advertisers to target people all through the day. We see on average around 2.5 hours of listening across Spotify's platform per user in a day, and that global number is indicative of the fact that people were just carrying audio with them, really as a partner for the things that they're doing. And really those spaces in the past that you couldn't talk to somebody without potentially being too disruptive, like running, for what we did with Michelob Ultra, are really rich and interesting. So I think that there's a great number of ways that you can now advertise to people in audio that don't rely just on the commute that we used to do. So that at-home experience is very important as well. Many people are not commuting today. Obviously, the streaming behaviors have changed as a result of our pandemic. And what we've seen is a huge increase of listening in gaming devices. People are still using their mobile phones as well, but they're using them more as a remote to control the devices around their homes. And they're also changing some of their behaviors. So they're actually listening to moments like family time moments. Much like myself, my Discover Weekly has been completely transformed in the last few months based on some of the listening that my son has decided to put on to Spotify.
There were some really good brand campaigns that you highlighted there, Rob, and some of them were fairly brave. Have you, or do you think brands will become even braver as a result of COVID in terms of how they want to reach consumers?
I think that's a really interesting question. I don't know if they become more brave. I think that they become more considerate of the ways that they can advertise to consumers in a moment like the one we're in right now. And I think that there's an opportunity to really listen into your audience to make sure that you're making the right message impactful. And that's why for us, I think our platform that we launched as our own brand at Spotify is around listening is everything. And we believe that if the world listens, the world can be better. And I think that there's an opportunity for brands to use the data to sort of guide you there, but also always be considerate of the culture that's happening and of the context that's there. We do that purposely. We don't say that the data necessarily creates the advertising or creates the creative. The data just kind of gives us the landscape for us to think about. And then it really is our kind of empathetic way of acting and listening that allows us to take focus of that context, take focus of that culture, and then apply that. And then you can start to do things that feel a little bit more brave, because I think that bravery only really comes if you are empathetic to the end user. And I think in this time that we're in right now, there's probably never been a better opportunity to do that.
Okay, and we have another question, Ruby. This is great. We're on a roll. This is better than a live event. I don't have to coax people to put their hands in the air and do various things like that. So this is great. The third question we've got is around the biggest challenges you're finding when talking to brands. What are the kind of the biggest challenges or the biggest issues they raise when you talk to them about using audio in their campaigns?
That's a very good question. I think the number one is the misconception that all audio is radio. There is definitely a misconception that all audio is radio. And what we try to explain is the opportunity for understanding streaming audio versus traditional radio. And radio is a powerful medium, but I think the disruption that happened in video 10, 15 years ago with the digital nature of video creation is now happening in audio, and it's the disruption that's happening to radio. So by understanding that, we then can understand a different way of thinking about audio. And I think that also plays into the second challenge that we have a lot of the time, which is that my brand's a visual brand, and we have visual ways of communicating. So how can we really use audio? That's why I like to play that case study really from Tarantino, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. There really is no visual medium quite like Hollywood. And there is an opportunity for brands to either be additive to their visual experience. We're not necessarily saying take that away, but there is also the opportunity to do what we did with BBC in the 7 Worlds, 1 Planet, where you can actually think about using the theatre of a mind, transform people into something else, and really take them to a different experience by using audio as well. So I think those two are really the big ones, just that audio is radio and we're a visual brand. And what we try to do is understand where the brand's coming from, and some of those core principles of what makes a brand important or what makes a campaign important still really can be useful in audio and can really be exciting when you think about it as streaming audio versus radio.
Actually, on the back of that, Rob, I have a question, which is, the difference between podcasts. We've seen, podcasts have been around for years, but they've kind of really exploded over the last couple of years. In terms of music and podcasts, where are you seeing the kind of the biggest growth in terms of listeners, and in terms of where are you getting the greatest trends?
Good question. What's really interesting, actually, from running the numbers on podcasts, is that actually it's sort of compounding the listening overall. We're actually seeing growth in music and podcasts happening at the same time. So at first there might have been this conception that or misconception that actually podcast was going to eat away at music listening. That's not actually the case. What's happening is that people are adding more listening, mainly because there's just more places and spaces and opportunities to listen now. And podcasts are fitting into that as well. I think what's exciting, obviously we're seeing growth in podcasts as we sign on some really big names and big hitters. Yesterday we announced Michelle Obama is going to be hosting her podcast exclusively on Spotify. And we see obviously massive trends as a result of that, of people listening to podcasts. I think what's interesting about podcasts as well is that it's still quite a young medium. And I think from an advertising perspective, it's still really thought about as a space that's complex. And what we're doing is kind of breaking that down, helping people understand how you can advertise in those moments on podcasts. And not everything has to be a one-size-fits-all. I think traditionally, podcast has been host-read ads, hitting key points. But as that scales and as that becomes an interesting space for advertisers to target people, we're finding really new and interesting ways to integrate brands into that experience, or have a much more, probably more advertising-led message in that experience as well. The other thing that's important as well in terms of podcasts is that we're bringing the functionality that we have in music to podcasts. So we can obviously understand and insert advertising into user experience through streaming, and we're bringing what we call streaming ad insertions into podcasts as well, so that it's a great experience for an advertiser. It's also a great experience for the user as well. And that's what we're constantly trying to do, is marry up those two worlds. But yeah, I think a podcast is a rich territory is really new and interesting for us. And we're thankfully, I think, being seen to be disrupting the game for the better.
Okay, and then I suppose one final question from me would be, what sector are you seeing in terms of people, kind of demographic? What demographic are you seeing as the biggest grower in audio? What are you really seeing?
I think the biggest growth in audio, from our perspective, is really that Gen Z millennial audience. It's teens and above. Younger audiences, when you talk to younger audiences, Gen Z, about audio, they don't think radio, they think Spotify. We are the first platform that they think about audio, and that sort of digital nature that they are. They're all born into this digital world, so it's not a step for them to be there. So I think what's interesting is that you see this growth of younger audiences on the platform. But then as we mature in markets, we've been in certain markets for 10 plus years, we're starting to see older audiences now become much more familiar with it. Even my mother in just north of London now listens to playlists on Spotify, and that's not just because I'm coaching her to do that all of the time. But I think you're also seeing that of the baby boomers as well, starting to come onto the platform as they mature. So it's both ends of the spectrum, but really we are a great place for advertising to younger audiences.
And the audience have come back. They've awoken. They've been inspired by these questions. We've got another question, Rob. Sorry to keep you on for a little longer. How do you define success in audio advertising? If you're new to audio and not, how best might someone measure what ROI is there to measure and provide a real good insight for brands that operate in this space?
Yeah, great question. I think that when people talk about innovation and creativity and the exciting things that you can do with a medium that's being disrupted, you also sometimes worry, can I actually measure any of that stuff though? And as a brand or marketer or a media buyer, obviously measurement is incredibly important. So we've taken great strides in the last few years to bring on pretty much every third-party measurement company that you could want in major markets. And what we encourage advertisers to do is let us know if there are specific measurement studies that they want to use when they're running their campaigns. And we utilize all of those. We also have our first-party data as well that we provide to advertisers when needed. But we are effectively capturing all of the major measurement studies to make sure that we are customer bespoke for the needs of every sector, because I know it will be different for CPG than it will be for tech. And as a result, we make sure that we're using the right measurement studies in every single market that is needed.
And to finish us for the day, unless we get another one in, Rob, they're worse than me in terms of putting out questions, which I love. Someone has asked, where do you see audio advertising in the next few years? Where do you see it going?
That's a great question. I wonder if my team asked that question, because that's a great one. I often talk back to what we saw at Cannes last year and what won the audio and radio category. And what won was not actually really a traditional audio ad. It was a campaign by 360i and HBO for Westworld. And it was an Alexa skill, a Google skill. And it was this kind of multifaceted audio experience that really took you into the world to play the game of Westworld. And that to me is fascinating, because I think that is a great example of how being a digital first platform allows you to actually play around with audio, create games, create experiences that actually users want to go and do. And it's, to me, I think, changing the way that we think about it. I think the same thing happened with out of home a few years ago or so, when it became digital out of home, and we started to understand how we could be much more in the moment, or we could be using great experiences. And before the HBO Westworld winning award last year, I talked a lot about the British Airways out of home campaign in London, where if you remember it, there was the young boy on the digital billboard would come up and point at the plane. And I would say, like, that's a great example of how you're using data, simple experience, to create something that's brilliant for the medium. And I think we're just at the early stages of that in audio. So I could really see in the next 5 years, more brands and advertisers being brave by leaning into understanding the data and sort of simplifying it in a way that actually makes it really additive, really exciting, and really something that people want to hear.
No, that's brilliant. Thank you, Rob, and a great answer. It's very exciting times, and obviously a great sector of the market to work in when it comes to audio. Well, I think that's all our questions from the audience. I wanted to say thank you so much for being part of Festival Fridays. I thought it was a really interesting presentation. For those of you and your colleagues who couldn't make it, there will be a recording of this, so we will send that out to everyone who registered as well. Thank you very much. Let's give a round of applause to Rob while you're at your desks. Hey. Well done, Rob. It's very weird doing this stuff in the virtual space, but so it's all good. It's all good. We will be back in a couple of weeks with our next session. In the meantime, I'm off to go and get a lockdown haircut because I realised how bushy it is looking in that camera. But have wonderful weekends. Thank you once again to Rob and to Spotify, and thank you all for listening in on a Friday. We will see you soon. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rob.